Cycles repeating, the earth is speaking, saying time has come to wake up from this nightmare of lives. So many shattered lives, reaching out, crying out for freedom, crying out for love. Carried by a current, till we stand side by side on the brink of a brand new dawn. We come together while the waters rise, and there's a stirring deep inside, deep inside. We come together to stand up for our lives. What on earth does it take to thrive? While we've been sleeping, our hearts were beating so much closer than we ever knew. Beneath the noise, there is an inner voice whispering clear and true. The veils are finally lifting, the waves becoming clear. There's a dream without a limit, and a vision so strong, every person knows they belong. They come together while the waters rise, there's a stirring deep inside, deep inside. We come together to stand up for our lives. What on earth does it take to thrive? Come together while the waters rise, there's a stirring deep inside, deep inside. We come together to stand up for our lives. What on earth does it take to thrive? Out in the open, thrive, healing what's broken. Every heart, every life, claiming our place in it now. Come together while the waters rise. There's a stirring deep inside, deep inside. We come together to stand up for our lives. We all have what it takes to thrive. Come together while the waters rise. There's a stirring deep inside. We come together to stand up for our lives. We all have what it takes to thrive. We come together while the waters rise. There's a stirring deep inside. Come together to stand up for our lives. We all have what it takes to thrive. We all have what it takes to thrive. We all have what it takes to thrive.
Howdy, folks. I was talking with this fish the other day, and I said to the fish, "Hey, how's the water?" And she looked back at me and she said, "How's the what?" And that's the way it is with worldview for a lot of people, a lot of the time. You know, sometimes we can't actually see the context that we're living in. Sometimes we're looking at the same thing as someone else, or the same thing we were yesterday, and seeing it completely differently. If you're looking at your screen now, are you seeing two faces or are you seeing a chalice? See if you can go back and forth between the two just by changing your perception. And sometimes we're in a bubble, and it may seem very beautiful, but we don't know we're in the bubble. So what's it like to actually break through that bubble and see what it's contained in, see what else there is to see? It can be very beautiful. It can be very Portal. I'm Foster Gamble, and I am your host.
Foster, sorry to interrupt, especially so early, but we lost you already for about the 8 seconds there. So if you could just repeat what you were just saying.
Okay. I'm not able to turn my video on at the moment. Leandro, can you turn my video on? There we go.
You're on.
All right, thank you. So did I freeze while I was still showing images?
It was just as you were making the transition from the beautiful fish image.
Okay, so I froze right after the fish?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's worth sharing. Let me go back and share this with you folks. Hold on a second. Okay. So what I was sharing is that just as a fish may be completely unaware of the water that they're swimming in. I mean, imagine being a fish and for the first time actually jumping out of the water and looking down going, oh, wow, I didn't know I was in that. It's kind of like that with Worldview. And as well, you can be looking at the same thing that you were yesterday or that someone else is and see it completely differently. The image that should be on your screen now, are you seeing two faces or are you seeing a chalice? Make sure you can see both and then see if you can just toggle back and forth just by changing the nature of your perception. This is a wonderful old image of basically living in the bubble of your own perception and then breaking through that paradigm, breaking through that worldview to actually see beyond what you've seen before. And it can be very beautiful. It can be very scary. It's, in the least case, transformational. Okay, so let me introduce myself again for anyone who's new to this. I'm Foster Gamble. I'm your host in the Freedom Portal. And the subject for today is worldview. How have we arrived at our worldviews and why do they matter? So this is kind of an auspicious month for us. We're coming up on our 2-year anniversary, and this is the final show in a series where we've covered every sector, all 13 sectors, the major sectors of human endeavor. So these will all be archived, and for people who want a deep dive into every sector and who want to hear from experts in every sector and who want to engage a group dialogue about the information and the perspectives in that sector, that's all going to be archived now. So you are participating in the final one in this series, and we've saved Worldview for last. And we'll talk about why. You know, it's the one that you see everything else through, and we'll go into that. Let me also welcome our live stream audience. There are a number of people out there already who are listening on or watching on YouTube, on Twitter, on Rumble, and on Odyssey. So thank you for joining us. A number of our partners and Freedom Portal members are also streaming this out on their channels. Thanks to all of you for helping us get this broadcast out. We think it's a really important one. Our purpose here in the portal is to create a thriving world. And we really want to get the word out about our work on solutions here at Thrive. So for those of you who are watching on one of the live streams and not a part of the Freedom Portal yet, if you want to join us for part 2 of this episode, the part 1 will go about 35-40 minutes, and then we'll take a brief break where we will continue on Zoom with our subscribers. And if you want to continue, if you're not a subscriber yet and you want to continue, you have the opportunity to rejoin the show for free, having a free 10-day trial in the Freedom Portal. And we'll show you how to do that if you want to. So that'll be coming up in about 35 to 40 minutes. We'll transition and we will tell you how. So back to worldview. So people used to think the world was flat for most of human history. Now, of course, there are those who are prone to believing the CIA who actually think that once again, but we're not going to go there today. You know, most people also think that the sun comes up in the morning. The solar system is hanging static in space, like the one hanging from the ceiling in your primary school classroom. Most people think that objects fall down and that taxes are the price we pay for living in a civilized world. So some of them may be part of your worldview. So let's just start with those and unpack them for a minute. So the sun doesn't actually come up in the morning. What happens is the earth turns, revealing the sun. But we don't tend to think of it that way because we're used to using language and being taught in school that the sun comes up. That's the one thing you can count on is the sun comes up in the morning. Well, not so much. So the solar system is actually spiraling through the galaxies at astronomical speeds while the planets are circling around the sun. So the whole thing is this beautiful cosmic spiral. But again, we're not taught that. So we tend to not think that way. We tend to think that the sun is somehow static. And then taxes. So it's very noble to think that taxes are the price we pay for civilization and feel good about writing that check and sending it in because it's going to take care of everybody. Well, the evidence is not good that it does that. There's lots of better ways to do that. The fact of the matter is, and a third grader will understand this very clearly, that taxes are outright theft. If somebody takes another's property, in this case, their money, against their will under the threat of incarceration or violence, that's theft. So objects don't even fall down. Objects fall in toward the center of gravity. So when you're standing on the planet and you drop it, it looks like it's falling down. It's actually falling in. Things go in and out from the center. So if you're in Antarctica and you're dropping something from the perspective of someone outside the planet who's looking at the entire planet with the North Pole at the top, that object for you that you're dropping is actually dropping up for them. So it's a bit of a mind bender because of our indoctrination. And worldview is like that. We live in it. And because many don't recognize what it is, situations can get very dangerous. So differences in worldview right now about health, about authority, about freedom are currently tearing apart marriages, families, friendships, communities, humanity. Well, Stalin and Hitler and Mao lived in their own little bubbles. They lived in fear and hatred, dissociated from human connection and empathy, and they thought, if we believe them, that they could get to peace by controlling everyone, bending them to their will. Now that seems like a thing of the past, but today some Rothschilds, the late David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, George H.W. Bush, Dick Cheney, George Soros, Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, Yuval Harari, and if you don't know him, I'll introduce you to him shortly, and many others have followed in the footsteps of the ones I mentioned before to try to achieve their idea of peace by owning everything, getting rid of most humans, and totally controlling the rest, all as a function of their worldview. In a pleasant contrast, sort of pleasant, a guy named Viktor Frankl was able to remain a radiant, loving, clear man throughout the worst imaginable treatment in a Nazi concentration camp and left a legacy of his worldview. So in our whole systems thinking tool, let me share my screen again with you for a minute here. Those of you who are familiar with the Thrive work already, this will be familiar. to you. And this is what we call the sector navigator in Thrive 1. And in this navigator, this magic carpet that we flew around the world and out into the cosmos and down into the atoms and so forth, our navigator was looking at the whole system, which is a toroidal system with a vector equilibrium geometry inside it, because there are 13 sectors that thrive, and a number of other groups throughout the 90s came to agree upon as a useful model for looking at the whole of human endeavor. And if you look at this image, you'll see environment, education, governance, infrastructure, economics, health, media, science, arts, spirituality. But at the very center of the vector equilibrium is worldview. And we all agreed on that. We're making up this model because you see every other sector, you see your relations, you see your economics, your media, your science, and so forth. You see it through the worldview that you're carrying. And then this is the 2D model where we have the sectors around the outside, again, worldview in the center. And then we also have what we call the levels of engagement, which go 3 levels deep. Starts outside with meeting immediate needs. This is for activism. Some people are really good and drawn to feed the hungry and doctor the underprivileged and so forth. And others are more oriented toward how can I improve the system so that immediate needs are better met? So that's systemic change. And in the very center, once again, is the consciousness shift. I know a lot of people watching this are very interested in philosophy, in worldview, in consciousness. And we put consciousness at the center, not because it's better than any of the others, but it's simply the most highly leveraged. The more accurate your worldview is to reality, the better your systems are going to operate, because they're going to be in harmony with the unified field. And the better your systems operate, the better immediate needs are going to be met. And that's going to allow people all over the planet someday to thrive. Okay, so worldview. Well, what is it? What is a worldview? Well, who's asking? Besides me, when you ask yourself, what's a worldview? Who are you that's actually asking? Because who you believe yourself to be will shape your own working definition. Those of you who know our work here know that as philosophers, scientists, activists, we are dedicated to truth. And truth begins with defining things to be actually the way they are. So let me share my screen one more time again and show you a definition of worldview. Dictionary definition is: a worldview is a noun meaning a comprehensive conception, this should be or philosophy, of the universe and of humanity's relation to it. Okay, I actually have my own working definition of worldview, which is the belief system through which you interpret your perceptions of what's going on. Okay, so where does worldview come from? In our 7 levels deep, we tend to do a little sweep of history, very, very briefly, but to try to actually look at the whole, because it gives us a much better understanding if we can do kind of a Cliff's Notes version of history and worldview itself. So historically, as far as we can tell, every culture has had their own creation myth, whether it was chariots of the gods, or whether it was turtles piled upon turtles, or whether it was the Big Bang, or the 7 days of creation. Every culture has seemed to intrinsically and naturally struggle to find a worldview which gives them some peace of mind as to their place in the absolutely boundless mystery of the cosmos. So originally, that was, looking back, it would have emerged out of the sages in the tribe. Then when you had rulers, you had kings telling you what you needed to believe. Then the religions come along, and then they tell you what to believe. And then science comes along and says, okay, well, we're hardcore facts and evidence. It leads to this. So now this is what you need to believe. And of course, it leaves out a tremendous amount of metaphysical intangibles. We'll get into that in a minute. So then the state comes along and says, censor you, whatever the tyranny of the day calls for.
We just lost you again, Foster, for the last 8 seconds. So if you could just repeat that.
Okay, so I was saying that after the tribe and rulers and religion, science comes along and tells you what to believe, but it's lacking in the phenomena that is intangible, that is metaphysical, that is most of the universe. So then the state comes along and it tells you that, we're in charge, so you have to believe this, or otherwise we're going to censor you, we're going to incarcerate you, we're going to kill you, we're going to take your money, whatever the tyranny of the day might be. So then corporations come along and they're more powerful than the state. So now they're telling you what you need to believe. Or, big pharmaceuticals or international health agencies. And they use the media, they use government schooling and so forth to do that. So the source of your worldview, and looking back through history, is really critical to understand. So why does it matter? Why does your worldview matter? Well, fundamentally, when I look at the entire sweep of history, if you believe that the abstraction of the collective, the group, now we all use the word group all the time. It's just important to remember that there's no such thing. It's a convenient abstraction like a dozen or purpose. It's a very convenient thing, but it's not real. It's not a tangible thing. There is no collective that you can touch, that you can identify, other than as a collection of individuals. So if you believe that the abstraction of the collective, which is made up, is more important than the reality of the individuals, like you and me, if you implicitly trust government, therefore, and you trust bankers and pharmaceutical companies, you might obediently give up your freedom, your business, your body, and your children to the edicts of the state. So it's really important. This stuff really matters. What's the worldview of the Illuminati, of the globalists, of the New World Order? Well, as far as I can tell, it's one of scarcity. It's one of desperation. It's one of no sense of themselves as metaphysical. And anything that is metaphysical is simply dark forces that they're trying to harness. So their strategy, therefore, to keep their fear at bay and to try to be in charge of everything is make people afraid, pit them against each other, and then fool them into being under their control. Now, we are at a turning point in history, and I am really excited about this. So people are waking up like never before to the dangerous deception of the collective, of collectivist thinking, fascism, socialism, communism, even democracy. And we're waking up just in time, because the global domination agenda, what we call the GDA, is instituting, if they can, what we call an OWG. It's a one world government. And this is the NWO. This is the New World Order, or the Great Reset, whatever you want to call it. It's happening, and it's happening big time, and it's going to continue to tyrannize the entire planet if we don't stop it. Okay, so let's step back a minute and look from the perspective of all of the research and the media that we've created at Thrive. And let's look at Worldview. There is a blog on the old website called Worldview. We did a lot of research on this, and then shared what we thought was most succinct and helpful with people. And in every single sector on our website, we always start with a vision, with the current danger, and the opportunity. So let's do that with Worldview. So at Thrive, we view life from an integral, inclusive, whole systems perspective that supports all to be free and to thrive on a healthy planet. So great. So what's in the way of that? Everybody wants that. Well, not everybody, but most people. So the danger is that people with belief systems that condone corruption and violence have rigged a system, virtually all the systems, where they have virtual monopolies on both the source of money and the military power to enforce their agenda. Okay, that's pretty grim. So what's the opportunity? The opportunity is that people are engaging worldwide in conversations like these in the Freedom Portal that inspect and expose various destructive systems and the worldviews that put them in place, supporting the emergence of greater integrity and morality in the process. Okay, so let's start diving in to the essence of our worldview. And the place I recommend that people start is, who are you? Who am I? Who are we? So let me share a little perspective. Are we isolated bodies whose thoughts are random epiphenomena emerging from the molecular activity of the gray matter of our brains? I think most people on the planet think so, particularly the technocrats, the transhumanists. We'll get into that a little bit later. Or are we boundless metaphysical beings located in the vibrational frequencies of perception on planet Earth to have a learning experience for our own growth and for the universe to better know itself through our growing perception and understanding? Are we destined to control nature, GMO, weather control, nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, what the powers that be or want to be call full spectrum dominance? Or are we destined to live in harmony with it through honoring the whole system dynamics of the unified field, through organic permaculture, resonant energy access, holistic health, truth-telling, compassion, reverence for all life? We'll let those questions float in the air for a bit. So where did we come from? Nobody really knows. It's possible on planet Earth. There's a lot of evidence that either that we are the result of panspermia, where life units were sent out all through the cosmos and took root on various planets. A lot of evidence that life was growing and evolving itself, and then extraterrestrials came and bred with pretty rudimentary beings, and all of a sudden there were these huge leaps in consciousness. We end up with Mozarts and Shakespeare's, and so a lot of evidence of that, but we don't know for sure. The Arthur Young's theory of process that I've talked to you about before, and we'll go into in a moment, talks about this arc of process coming from pure potential through dividing into the forces of push and pull at the subatomic level, and then becoming atoms, encasing itself as an atom, combining as a molecule, and then joining as cells, which develop in chains that grow the ability to grow. They gain the ability to grow, and then at the next level, they start casting off seeds, and animals emerge who add in to growth the factor of mobility. And then finally, including all of those capacities, human beings come along who have all the capacities to grow and to move, but also the capacity to self-reflect. So those are just some perspectives on where we might have come from. Next question I want you to consider is, who should rule? We touched on this in Thrive 2. We've asked a lot of people. Mary Ruart was the first one to suggest this to me. She asked people, who should rule? One person, a small group of people, a majority? You can see the sweep of history here. Or should everyone rule themselves? Now, when we ask people, almost everyone that we ask says, they think that people should rule themselves. And then again, most people turn right around and vote for their next fraudulent slave masters. So there's a real disconnect still in our society that threatens our very existence. So let's look at metaphysical beliefs for a minute, because there's experientially, it's hard to define everything that happens as a result just of things you can touch and measure. So, you know, looking way back, there was kind of a pagan life of where everyone attributed natural occurrences to some sort of god. So you'd have the god of the sea, and you'd have the god of thunder, and you'd have the god of lightning, and you'd have the god of the harvest, and so forth. And then they could pray to those gods, they could sacrifice to those gods, and so forth. And it gave them, I think, some peace of mind, even though they probably didn't feel like they were getting answered a whole lot of the time. So then along comes organized or so-called revealed religions. So just a real abbreviated view of the sweep of the biggest religions, starting with Judaism in 2085 BC. Then comes Hinduism, 1500 BC. Confucianism, all this in Asia, 600 BC. Buddhism, 560 BC. And particularly Buddhism and Hinduism have been exploring the metaphysical frequency realms through their monasteries and monks and practices and so forth for literally thousands of years. They've been mapping the invisible realms of consciousness. And a lot of people in the West just write off Eastern wisdom as if they don't know anything. That's a big mistake because they've known a lot more for centuries than we have in the West. What's the beautiful thing that's happening now is the West and East are coming together. Science and spirituality are coming together. So back to the timeline here. We're using obviously the Christian timeline just because it's the one that's most familiar with, but it's totally arbitrary. So Christianity in year 0, Islam in 610 AD, Sikhism in 1499 AD. And then intermixed in that is basic philosophy. Western philosophy really was pretty much born with Socrates in the 450s BC, and Socrates didn't leave any text behind. Very interesting. A guy that smart wasn't writing it down. What he did was create the so-called Socratic method, the empirical method of just asking questions and having one lead to the next. So he was actually kind of the grandfather of coherent and critical thinking. Then Plato comes along in the 420s BC, and Plato had a completely metaphysical model, just all about the perfection of beings, the perfection of everything that existed only in metaphysical dimensions. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that in the sense of of the archetypes of fundamental geometrical patterning, in holograms and fractalization in the universe. However, Plato became an excuse and a justification for one tyrant after another to become dictators, to incarcerate people, to murder people, to do eugenics, to do experiments and so forth, to try to match the masses to what they thought was their own perfection. So it was like a lot of things, it's been really abused. And then along comes Aristotle in 350s BC. And just the thing that sticks with me most about Aristotle is that he said truth is at the core of everything. That's what philosophy is. It's the love of truth. So as you find truth, you can reflect it in your actions in daily life. And that's what ethics is. So he had this statement where he said, truth leads to virtue. That means living in alignment with the unified field. It means not violating the unified field, which includes not violating anyone else or yourself. And virtue, when lived, leads to happiness. And I think that Aristotle was really kind of the beginning of secular morality, which we'll also go into in a bit. Okay. So I also want to include a lot of indigenous wisdom in this sweep of history, because in indigenous tribes, I'm most familiar with North America, South America, Australia, New Zealand. Indigenous tribes were looked upon by Westerners as very ignorant. And they didn't know a lot about technology. They didn't know a lot about science, but they knew a lot about life because they've been living to a great degree in harmony with life for centuries because of their reverence for the natural flow of life. So looking to world, we've talked about this in previous shows. In the dream world,
We just lost you again, Foster,
okay,
for the last 8 seconds.
Okay, so a lot of Western indigenous tribes counted a lot on the dream world for their guidance, for their intuition. And we've talked about this on previous shows that in the dream world, between about 4 and 13 cycles per second in your brain waves, that's a portal out to other realms beyond the physical. And whether you're accessing it through meditation, through plant medicine, through sports practice, through brainwave biofeedback, through dreaming, all different ways of altering your consciousness while staying awake, and then accessing the wisdom of the unified field. Okay, so then science comes along, and science, I think, has probably saved us and has taken us to the very brink of self-destruction. So what's the deal on science? Well, the scientific worldview prides itself on logic, which unfortunately has been taken over now by government, pharmaceutical companies, and so forth. It's turned into what's called scientism, where it's just people are using the guise of science to produce whatever data serves their masters who are trying to control everything and everyone. But real science follows the Socratic method. It follows the logic. You know, you need to create a thesis, and then you test the thesis, and then you adjust your thesis with your evidence, and you come up with a new thesis that's continually more accurate than the one before. And that's very helpful. That's led to the Industrial Revolution, which raised the quality of life, you know, faster in 100 years than it had in all of previous history. So, but science tends to be deterministic, material, based only on measurement, only on what it can measure, and only tends to value itself as it leads to productivity. So there's a real benefit in learning how to control the forces of nature, as long as you don't try to control nature herself, as long as you do it with reverence, with honor, so that you don't end up blowing yourself up. You don't end up destroying your food supply. You don't end up starting wars, which can lead to a lot of suffering and extinction. So science can either liberate us or lead to technocratic tyranny and transhumanism. So we're heading toward, in Buckminster Fuller's words, utopia or oblivion. And it depends on our worldview. We're coming to a nexus right now where spirituality is colliding with the transhumanist movement, who is trying to use artificial intelligence and tyrannic methods to actually take over all human beings, take over their bodies, and either eliminate them or be able to control their physiology, their emotional life, and make sure that they behave according to the dictates of the masters. And if we don't wake up to that, it's going to be a sorry sight. However, we can not only survive, we can thrive as a species on a fantastic planet, you know, in love with one another and life itself, if we align our worldviews sufficiently with the way things really are. Okay, so I mentioned in the beginning that we were going to need to break and close down the public venues and invite you all to come join us for free in the Freedom Portal on a free trial. And we've come to the time where we need to do that now. So in a few minutes, we'll cut the live streams. We'll move on to part 2 of the show. And in part 2, I'm going to be covering things like how to identify your own worldview. And then an exploration of what does it take to change your worldview, a worldview. And then we're going to go into the relationship more deeply of worldview and spirituality. They're so closely aligned and so vitally interlinked. We're going to look at how sufficiently accurate worldviews, as I mentioned, plus collaboration, can help humanity survive and thrive. That's what our Solutions Hub is about. And you'll find out more about the Solutions Hub if that's new to you on our website. We'll tell you a little more about it at the end of the show as well. So we'll also have time to take your questions and have some juicy discussions around those. That's my favorite part, actually. So you can join part 2 with a 7-day free trial. And your trial will get you way more than access to part 2 of the show. You'll get access to our archive. You can watch Thrive 2 for free. You'll get access to the Solutions Hub, which is currently in beta, where you can meet up with other like-minded people to create really powerful solutions together. And with that said, now I'm going to turn it over to Leandrew, who's going to take a minute to walk you through first a glimpse into the Freedom Portal itself for newcomers, and then transition to the Freedom Portal space, so you get familiar with this special community of the Freedom Portal and the Solutions Hub. Okay, Leandrew, welcome. Great to see you again.
Good to see you guys. Great to be back in the portal as always. And yeah, I'll go ahead and show all of you who are with us now, who aren't normally with us or who aren't part of our usual Freedom Portal crowd. I'll go ahead and show you guys how to handle this transition and how to become a part of our incredible Freedom Portal community. Because like you guys, you aren't seeing the chat here that we normally see, and it's we have a great community here, and I would love for you to be a part of it. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So first of all, when you go to the thriveon.com website, you're just going to scroll down and click on the area that says start free 7-day free trial. And once you click that, you'll be brought to this page that gives you the option of being an explorer or an angel, and in either level being monthly or annual. So you can go ahead and select whichever of those options is most appealing to you. And once you go through that process and fill out the form, you'll be taken to the thank you page, and it'll give you the option to return to the Freedom Portal catalog. And when you do, don't click the access now because you've already, you've set up your account, you've set up your credentials. So go ahead and click sign in to continue. You can go ahead and sign in using the credentials you just set up. And then once you sign in, you'll be returned to the Freedom Portal event page, where it'll give you, the event that's currently happening at the top of the fold, basically, as soon as you hit the website. And you can click attend to return to the Zoom session with us. Then it'll take you to the next page, and you can just click join webinar, and you'll be back in to the show and be able to continue the conversation with our Freedom Portal community. And we hope you guys go ahead and subscribe with us, because this is a great community and there's a lot of great content, a lot of things that Foster's going to be talking about in the next half that you really want to hear. So with that, that is how you navigate that process. And we wanted to show you guys our promo for the Freedom Portal that kind of gives you a taste of what the Freedom Portal looks like. Foster, do you want to introduce that at all?
No, go ahead. That was great. Just what you did. That's all that's needed.
Okay. Just a second.
This is just to give you a sense very quickly of what the Freedom Portal is about. The key is freedom. We are in a lethal mess right now in the world.
They're lying, and we know they're lying, and they know that we know that they're lying, yet still they lie.
Did you see what Fauci said? You see what the WHO did? Things that start bubbling up that I just feel like I need to communicate with somebody because there's all this crazy stuff happening.
Media is the greatest enemy and is the greatest tool being used against us.
A lot of people are probably familiar now with the World Economic Forum saying, well, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. But these people plan to own everything.
But we forget that underneath that are a bunch of scared children who have nuclear weapons and biological weapons, and now artificial intelligence.
Technocracy and understanding that is really a doorway into the whole next level of red pill.
And that's one of the reasons why we're pushing so hard to expose this stuff, and also to surface what are the ethical guidelines by which we can actually proceed harmoniously with the benefits of AI without falling prey to this authoritarian agenda.
This effort towards globalism and global governance is an effort to create extreme centralization. So a response to that is to decentralize.
The main promise that got me involved in the cryptocurrencies was the liberation and sovereignty of our species.
I think it's the most important topic on the planet right now. How can we create a universal morality that can actually guide us through all these different questions?
We are being connected by something much greater than ourselves.
People are gathering around truth and freedom because it's critical that we do.
Imagine the amount of human energy, creativity, liberation, release from fear.
We've got love, we've got the truth, and we've got the life force on our side. And ultimately that is going to be unstoppable, even if it's ugly in the transition.
We're changing the world. That's what's up, and the stakes have never been higher.
The good news is that this is still a story in the making.
Okay, so we're going to end the live stream now. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the live streams, and we are looking forward to seeing you